Hello there, my friend. We meet again here on my channel where we cut through the sensationalism, we cut through the fluff, we go right to the docs, right to the source. If that's the kind of stuff that you like, I like it too. So let's be friends. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Hey, this came out of nowhere. I mean, we were planning on talking about Gabby Petito tonight, a documentary series that I really enjoyed. I've also enjoyed some of the interviews that Gabby Petito's parents have done since then. And I can't wait to talk about it. But that's going to have to wait until tomorrow night because there has been some news that is broken today about Pastor John Paul Miller from Solid Rock Church down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And you guys know that we have talked about JP Miller. In fact, I don't like talking about JP Miller. He is a person who really just gives me creeps. And I think that while he probably did not pull the trigger, I think that he is responsible through his coercive behavior for the death of his late wife. And I don't even want to say they were estranged and they were headed for a divorce, but the fact remains they were still married, and it just bothers me because that makes him her next of kin when she died. But anyway, we have covered Micah Francis's death pretty extensively here on the channel. In fact, if you go over to the website, you can see the stuff that we've done. I mean, we've done a bunch of stuff. There's lots of case documents. There's all sorts of stuff. Okay, so if you haven't been on my website at all, that's a good place to go to talk about this case. But there's breaking news. Man, talk about burying the lead. It's already 2 minutes in. Breaking news. JP Miller is being sued, and the lawsuit alleges that he... You know what? This is a good opportunity to just stop and talk for a second. Okay, this video is going to really be about grown-up themes. We are going to be talking about all sorts of issues that are grown up and in true crime that are sexual in nature. Okay? I want you to know that I want to be able to use these words freely. But, I also want this video to get views. So there are words that we all just need to understand, okay? That I'm not going to use. I'm sorry for those of you that it makes angry or offends you by not using the actual word. But, we live in a YouTube ecosystem, so we kind of have to do that. But this lawsuit, guys, let's call it the R word, when somebody forcibly engages in sexual intercourse. Let's call it the R word, okay? We know what it is. It's non-consensual, it's violent, it's vile, it's disgusting. That is what is being alleged against Pastor Miller. And the lawsuit was filed just this morning at about a few minutes past 9 a.m. And we've got the lawsuit. It's 43 pages. And I feel like we need to go over all of it. So this is going to be a long one. There are details in here and I haven't read the whole thing. You guys know I have a day job, so I haven't been able to read the whole thing. I've just kind of skimmed it. But I've got a throat lozenge for me. I've got water on the ready. This is going to be long, okay? And this is also hopefully going to be a conversation. If you guys want me to see any... Chantel says, Gavin, we say grape. Is that what most people say? Okay, we'll say grape. The delicious nectar fruit. Yeah, okay. We'll say grape. Okay? Thank you, Chantal. I appreciate it. That is what we will say. You guys know what it is that I'm talking about when I say grape. And Jess, yes, it's against children. This is against a minor, a child. So there's going to be a lot today, guys. It's going to be a lot. So I don't blame you if you want to skip this one, because we're going to be talking about some really, really, really disgusting stuff. Okay? All right. With that, let's go ahead and just start reading these 43 pages. Here we go. Oh, put GF in your comment if you want me to see it. Okay? All righty. Let me get myself over here. Drag this out of the way. All right. So the plaintiff in this is Jane Doe number 1. The defendants are John Paul Miller, Reginald Wayne Miller. That is John Paul Miller's father, also known as Reginald Wayne Miller. All Nations Cathedral Church, formerly known as Cathedral Baptist Church of the Grand Strand, Inc., and Solid Rock Ministries, Inc. Okay, then there's the summons. We don't need to read the actual summons. Okay. Comes now the plaintiff, Jane Doe, who demands a jury trial of all matters triable to a jury, would allege as follows. For years, John Paul Miller and Reginald Wayne Miller, also known as Reginald Wayne Miller, it's going to refer to them as JPM and RWM, have presented themselves as devout religious leaders. They built their reputations in the Myrtle Beach community and beyond as men of faith, dedicated to spreading God's word and training future church leaders. But this image was a lie. Behind their religious facade, John Paul Miller and Reginald Wayne Miller engaged in SA and predatory conduct, often targeting minors. They used their positions of power to manipulate and exploit vulnerable victims while concealing their actions from the public. Upon information and belief, this deception has shielded them from law enforcement scrutiny, allowing their misconduct to continue unchecked. Now remember, these are allegations. I should say that very, very clearly here, guys. I'm not saying that this is true. I am not saying it is not true. But these are allegations that somebody else is making, okay? I've already told you, JP Miller just completely creeps me out, and I've told you before, I think that he's a performer. I think he's a performance artist, and I don't think he's much more than that. He's a talented musician. He's a talented orator. He gets people to listen to him, which is a talent. I mean, I'm sorry that it is, but it is. And but I don't think that he's anything more than that. And I think that the allegations that we have heard from Micah, from his first wife, Allison Williams, I think I have a picture of her, right? This is an old picture of her. Their allegations, hers and Micah's, are that JP Miller engaged in weird sexual activities. And so, yeah, I don't know how I got on that subject. Just that we're talking about allegations here. Okay, they haven't been proven. Okay, RWM's son, JPM, followed in his father's footsteps and took over RWM's religious empire. Let me bring this up because I deeply appreciate it, Aida. Aida says, love your content. Sorry, we'll be skipping this one. I can't handle kids being harmed. Aida, I do not blame you one bit. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for checking in, and I don't blame you at all because this is deeply disturbing. Thank you. Okay, RWM's son, JPM, followed in his father's footsteps and took over. I just want to say Reginald. RWM is so long. Reginald's religious empire. Upon information and belief, these institutions were not created to only serve God, but to further Miller and J.P. Miller's predatory behavior. Let's do it that way. It rolls off the tongue a little bit. Reginald, I'm going to try to say Miller, and John Paul Miller, I'm going to try to say J.P. or J.P. Miller, okay? Okay. Paragraph 10. The churches and their related entities operated without adequate protections for minors, creating an environment where abuse could thrive. Upon information and belief, this was not accidental. It was part of a calculated plan to groom victims while simultaneously gaining the community's trust and financial support. Recently, the death of J.P. Miller's ex-wife, Micah Frances Miller, has once again drawn attention to both J.P. Miller and Miller. Micah Frances Miller's relationship with J.P. Miller was deeply troubled. Upon information and belief, it exemplified the power and control he exercised over women in the church. As detailed in this complaint, the defendants, both individually and together, have built, maintained, and concealed a system of misconduct, I'm skipping that on purpose, that harmed numerous minors, including plaintiff Jane Doe 1. So they believe that Jane Doe is a victim, but that she is not the only victim. And we're talking about underage victims here, right? Underage victims. Okay, paragraph 16. Parties. Plaintiff Jane Doe 1 is a person now over the age of 18, but she was a minor at the time of the majority of events giving rise to causes of actions alleged in this complaint. The plaintiff, Jane Doe 1, is now a citizen and resident of Indiana. Plaintiff is filing this action anonymously under the pseudonym Jane Doe 1 because the subject matter of this lawsuit could bring embarrassment and publicity to the plaintiffs. I think that pluralizing plaintiff there may be an indication that other plaintiffs may join. Okay, plaintiff Jane Doe 1 risks humiliation and embarrassment if she is identified, since some of her allegations involve descriptions of sexual acts foisted upon her, and allowing her to proceed with a pseudonym brings her comfort. If the ability to proceed with a pseudonym is not allowed, the plaintiff will experience further harm because of exercising her legal rights. If plaintiff is forced to disclose her identity, that disclosure will amplify the injuries that are at issue in this litigation. I would imagine, by the way, guys, I hope that Jane Doe 1 here is experiencing a moment of deep empowerment. And if she isn't already, I hope that she does. I don't need her or want her to not be protected, her identity to not be protected. I don't want to know who this person is. I think that she should be able to remain under a pseudonym. But if you remember the Danny Masterson case, while not a perfect comparison, because no comparisons ever are, two of the three Jane Does actually came out publicly. They felt empowered to do so, and I was really impressed with that. So whatever this plaintiff decides to do, I'm completely supportive of it. I think because we're talking about GRAPE and we're talking about SA and other things that we're going to get into, it is perfectly reasonable to give her that privacy. Okay, paragraph 22. The public interest in the disclosure of plaintiff's identity is minimal and not outweighed by the substantial harm of revealing her identity. There will be no furtherance of justice by requiring the public disclosure of plaintiff. Once the defendants are served and retain counsel, plaintiff's identity will be revealed to defendants in a confidential matter if not already known. I'm sure he already knows who it is. Defendants are not prejudiced by allowing plaintiff to proceed anonymously, and any potential prejudice will be mitigated by the confidential disclosure of plaintiff's actual identity soon after this lawsuit is filed. By the way, I think that J.P. Miller probably feels safe and comfortable with the followers that he retains. I don't know how many of them he retains, but I think that he retains them because he's a good manipulator. He's good at it. So I think that there are plenty that are still following him. It would not surprise me if he tells his inner circle, those followers, who this person is, and it gets leaked out. But I want you to know that as long as this person wants to remain anonymous, I will not reveal that person's name or identity at all, because it just shouldn't be done. But I would not be surprised if it's leaked. Okay, defendants. Upon information and belief, defendant John Paul Miller is a citizen and resident of the state of South Carolina and is currently the pastor at Solid Rock Ministries in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. At all times involved in this action, JP was a pastor in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, either at All Nations Cathedral Church, hereinafter All Nations, formerly Cathedral Baptist Church of the Grand Strand, Inc., hereinafter Cathedral, or Solid Rock Ministries, hereinafter Solid Rock. Whether JP was working or involved in some type of employment or agency capacity with, at All Nations, Cathedral, or Solid Rock, they were all the same enterprise, and JPM was the alter ego of All Nations, Cathedral, and Solid Rock. Yeah, and that implies a certain amount of work to hide what his true capacity was there. That's what it implies to me anyway. Defendant JP was a man over the age of 18 at all times involved in this action. Upon information and belief, defendant Miller, his father is, should we say Daddy Miller? Daddy Miller. Let's do that. Is a citizen and resident of the state of South Carolina and was the head pastor of All Nations and or Cathedral at the time of some of the allegations contained herein. Defendant Daddy Miller is the father of JP. Upon information and belief, defendant Daddy Miller has also referred to himself as Reginald as a way to hide prior transgressions. Oh, so it's not that. Wow. So it's not that people have just misspelled his name. No, he's tried to hide who he is. Okay, upon information and belief, All Nations Cathedral Church is a continuation of Cathedral Baptist Church of the Grand Strand, Inc., and is organized and existing under the laws of the state of South Carolina. All Nations is the successor in interest of Cathedral and assumed all of its assets and liabilities. All Nations and Cathedral will be referred to throughout this complaint as one intertwined entity known as Cathedral. Okay? JP and Daddy Miller, as the alter egos of Cathedral, All Nations, and Solid Rock, exercise complete control over the operations, finances, and leadership of all three organizations, effectively consolidating them into a single, unified entity that is indistinguishable from one another. Even if any defendant claims to be a charitable entity, upon information and belief, JP and Daddy Miller exercise complete control over Cathedral and Solid Rock without adhering to proper corporate formalities, using the churches as fronts to funnel funds for their own personal financial gain rather than for legitimate charitable or religious purposes. Each act of any named defendant or identified actions of employees and or agents of any defendants identified in this action were performed within the course and scope of any respective duty or employment capacity. Okay, they're just, I mean, they are beating this dead horse, right? Like, oh my goodness, they're one and the same. Daddy Miller, JP Miller, Cathedral, Solid Rock, All Nations, it's all the same. And they were just trying to enrich themselves. That's, I mean, man, they're hitting this hard. Each act of negligence, gross negligence, recklessness, and or willful and wanton conduct by any person employed by any defendant or any defendant is an act or occurrence under the South Carolina Tort Claims Act. Defendant's negligent, grossly negligent, reckless, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Okay, we're just going to keep going. Yeah. Let's see if there's stuff that I want to. Yeah, okay. So not only did they had the power to control their employees, their agents, they had the duty to establish policies, they were to train people, blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's start back up at 47. By the way, guys, I have made this document and 2 other documents, which are exhibits to this, available to my patrons over on Patreon. There, if you want to support me, that is a good way to do that. There's a link down in the description below. You can get all of these. They're also, I mean, you can go to the Horry County court office and you can download them there for free. I mean, they're available. Okay, I don't want to put up some kind of paywall, but it's a benefit that I give my patrons. So if you would consider patronage, then you would get access to this pretty easily. Okay. Paragraph 47. Defendants were responsible for developing and enforcing non-ecclesiastical policies and procedures to regulate the conduct of adult church members, ensuring that minors were not placed in vulnerable situations where they could be exploited or abused. Despite the inherent risks associated with minors in a church, youth programs, and church-based mentorship, defendants failed to implement common sense safeguards such as prohibiting one-on-one unsupervised interactions between adults and minors, requiring background checks for all staff and volunteers, and establishing mandatory reporting protocols for suspected abuse. These are things that churches and other organizations that deal with youth should definitely do. Oh my goodness. Like, even I don't know that okay, I'm going to say it. Like, if you are a part of an organization like a church or like a YMCA or some other charity that interacts with youth, the very idea that there could be impropriety is I mean, could be like life-threatening to the enterprise, right? And not only do you want to protect the minors, but you want to protect the adults from some sort of maybe false report. So there should be cameras everywhere. There should never be one-on-one interactions between an adult and a child. It should be too deep. 2 adults for if there's a child or if there are many children, right? It should always be too deep. I mean, I would not work at a place where they would put me in a position where I am alone in a place with a child. I just would not even work at a place like that because I don't want any kind of false report. That's really what it boils down to. That could ruin one's life. And so, I mean, organizations should do that. And Solid Rock / Cathedral / All Nations, whatever, they should have been doing that. There should be mandatory reporting. Of course there should be. Okay, paragraph 49. Defendants misrepresented the safety of the church to minors and their families, creating a false impression that Cathedral, Solid Rock, and their affiliated programs were safe environments for children. By promoting the church as a place of trust and spiritual guidance while neglecting to put adequate protective measures in place, defendants knowingly placed minors at risk of harm. Their failure to create and enforce proper policies was not only negligent, but reckless and willful, as they ignored clear warning signs and failed to warn minors and their families about the dangers within the church. These failures directly contributed to the exploitation and abuse that occurred, making defendants liable for the harm suffered by plaintiffs and other victims. Defendants Cathedral, Solid Rock, JP, and Daddy Miller had a duty to provide employees and or agents with adequate knowledge and training to prevent the exploitation and abuse of minor children within the church while present on the premises or in a church-sponsored youth program. Some duties of Cathedral, Solid Rock, JP, and Daddy Miller include identifying inappropriate non-ecclesiastical behavior in adult staff, members, or volunteers and immediately reporting such behavior to designated entities, including law enforcement. Before the events underlying this case began in 1998, the defendants had actual knowledge that a vulnerable population of children or young adults attending the church and on the premises and participating in the youth programs would be at risk of exploitation or abuse if reasonable precautions were not taken in training, supervision, and monitoring of staff members or volunteers. Well, especially if they're the ones that are planning on exploiting the kiddos. Let's see, this is page 9. I just want to see. Okay. Yeah, let's finish out the summary. Okay, paragraph 56. This is because Daddy Miller had already been exposed as a predator, and his JP was following along in his steps and being a predator. Cathedral, Solid Rock, and their employees and or agents had the opportunity to prevent harm against vulnerable children. Yet, defendants Cathedral and Solid Rock, along with their employees and or agents, ignored clear warning signs of minors being exploited or essayed by church staff, members, or volunteers. The leadership of Cathedral and Solid Rock was front-loaded into power by Daddy Miller and JP in their church bylaws, which gave them complete control. At all times relevant here too, JP, Daddy Miller, and others with respect to the facts alleged herein acted within the course and scope of their employment and or agency with defendants, Cathedral and Solid Rock. Defendants knew that minor children exposed to emotional abuse, misconduct, or exploitation were at risk of severe and lifelong harm. Defendants also knew that if children were subjected to these abuses, they would sustain deep emotional trauma and long-term behavioral difficulties. Yeah. The negligent, grossly negligent, reckless, willful, or wanton acts, omissions, and liability of defendants include those of their agents, principals, employees, and or servants, both directly and vicariously, pursuant to principles of non-delegable duty, corporate liability, apparent authority, agency, ostensible agency, and or respondeat superior. I have to look up respondeat superior. It's a legal doctrine that holds that an employer responsible for the actions of their employees. Let the master answer. Okay. All right. Let's pause there for a second. We are about a quarter into this. A little less than a quarter into this. Let me see what you guys are saying over here in the comments section. Okay. Let's hide this. Let's bring this up. Donna says they sound just like the Catholic Church. Yeah, that is the natural behavior of the human creature, right? The human beast, especially one that belongs to an institution that defines who they are. Now you bring out the Catholic Church. That is, it has been true in the Catholic Church for sure. It's not the only church, but where priests attach their identity to the church, and then members and other members of the church attach their identity to it. So the one thing that must be protected is the church. That leads to the amplification of these kinds of abuses, in my opinion. Yeah. Let's see. Susan Lee, Gavin, at some point, Reginald started going by just Wayne. I believe it was after federal charges when he gave JP the church. Okay. All right. Great comment. Robin Bernardi says, the Boy Scouts have a rule of 3 people. My husband never closes his classroom door when he is teaching. Yeah, that is the key, right? We belong to a large organized church, and we have a congregation where we live. If I ever am teaching small children or the youth or whatever, or I don't know, leading them in some way, the doors are open, man. They are open. And my personal rule on that is that I just do it with my wife. Kimberly and I do it together. And that's protective of the kiddos. That's protective of us. Doors are never closed. That's the way it should be. Sensei Wackadoodle. Well, Sensei. No, that would be Sifu. Sorry. If someone is anonymous for a court case and someone, JP, ousts their ID, can he get into trouble? It depends on if there is an order. If like, for example, right now, there is nothing in the file except the complaint and the exhibits. My guess is there are probably 5 people that already know who this is, at least, the very least. So if there's an order from the court saying no putting out that person's identity, but it already happened, he's not going to get into trouble. Good question. I like it. Susan Lee, Gavin, I can't bring myself to refer to JP as a pastor. He didn't go to seminary and no affiliation ordained him to my knowledge, except himself or maybe his dad from his unaccredited college. Yeah, the reason that I refer to him as Pastor Miller is that it puts an exclamation point on what it is that he is alleged to have done. And not in this case only, like not in this lawsuit only, like in the whole thing. I have continued to say pastor, not to besmirch those who legitimately and with deep, what do we want to call that? Deep, heartfelt conviction and love of God. It's not to besmirch those people who are the majority of people who work in religious settings. It's just to call out the fact that, it's just to put an exclamation point on the whole thing. That's the way I do it. But I don't blame you. I don't blame you for holding that position at all. One Man's Trash says, Gavin, I think his army is dwindling. That type loves the pastor title, works for them. My dad was one of those. Ruined my life until I decided to stop letting it. I'm glad that you decided to stop letting it. Autumn, our intrepid lead mod, thank you. She's been through enough. Yeah, she's been through a lot, for sure. Becca says, Gavin, I hate people who hide behind religious or powerful roles to hide horrific behavior. It's awful. 100%. 100%. Patty, we can still use, says Gavin, we can still use the pastor. Yeah, I use the pastor. I do. Okay. Let's head back over here, and I'm going to kind of skip over jurisdiction and venue because this is just legalese. Yes, there is jurisdiction. Yes, this venue is proper. Yes, we're going to do this joint and severally if there's liability and it can be, separated. I think I'll even skip the alter ego part of things. Yes, they are one and the same. Let's see. Charitable immunity. This is interesting, I think. Defendants Cathedral and Solid Rock will likely claim to be charitable entities, which would subject them to charitable immunity caps. The Charitable Immunity Act references the South Carolina Tort Claims Act as the predicate statutory authority for a number of caps to be imposed by any person or entity against a Charitable Immunity Act entity. The relevant part, and it does this whole thing, but what they're going to do is argue that these caps don't apply to this because it's not really a charity. It's just a front for them. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and skip through that. Okay, statute of limitations is important. Okay, statute of limitations and plaintiff's right to bring this claim, because there could be a statute of limitations. I had wondered this, especially if it's been years, right? Let's read. Okay, statutory time bars on the filing of civil suits have exceptions. In some cases, plaintiffs do not know when a wrong occurred and may not discover their cause of action until years after the statute of limitations has expired. In response to such cases, courts and state legislatures fashioned the discovery rule to prevent the injustice which would result from the strict application of the statute of limitations. This doctrine balances the unfairness faced by a plaintiff who is deprived of a verdict against the harm suffered by a defendant in letting the case go to trial after a long delay. The discovery rule has been applied to cases in which survivors of childhood SA have repressed the memory of the abuse. In South Carolina, the discovery rule is applied to all cases of childhood SA before the year 2001. In 2001, the South Carolina legislature enacted South Carolina Code Section 15-3-555, which extends the statute of limitations for survivors of childhood SA, allowing them to file civil claims up to 6 years after turning 21 or within 3 years of discovering that their injuries were caused by the abuse. This tolling provision recognizes the psychological impact of childhood SA, particularly cases involving repressed memories or delayed awareness of harm, ensuring that survivors have a fair opportunity to seek justice. In this matter, the first abuse to Jane Doe 1 happened in 1998, but she was still a minor when the legislation was passed in 2001. Regardless of which standard applies, the statute of limitations has not expired regarding the claims of Jane Doe number 1 against any of the defendants. When applying the discovery rule pre-2001 in cases of previously repressed memories of childhood SA, courts balanced the harm of denying a remedy to a plaintiff who had no access to her memory against the hardships faced by a defendant defending against such long-standing claims. Some courts have applied the discovery rule to toll the applicable statute of limitations for the period during which a victim repressed the memory of the SA. Okay, so it goes on through. We all understand now there's a toll system, there is a discovery system. I think we can kind of skip through that. But they're basically saying either of these could apply here. Whichever one the court finds applies, that's the one we'll go with. Okay, and I'm doing this because this isn't specific information about the case. It's case law that they're going. Okay, so let's go right here, starting in 107. Jane Doe's realization of the 1998 assault and its effects were repressed at some time after the assault, but before turning 18, and her recollection of the 1998 assault did not trigger and reemerge until after the 2023 assault by JP, meaning that her cause of action for the 1998 assault only accrued in 2003. Ooh, I feel like I skipped over something. Hold on. Let me go back up here real quick. I just want to make sure. Okay. I'm not sure what the 2023. I just want to check this real quick, guys. Okay, I don't think it said anything about the 2023 assault, but we'll get into it, okay? 108, paragraph 108. Because Jane number 1 was unable to recognize the connection between the prior abuse and her ongoing trauma until the 2023 assault by JPM, her claim is timely under the discovery rule. If this claim is decided under the statute of limitations as delineated by the new code, the 3-year statute of limitations under that legislation does not begin to run until 2023, when plaintiff discovered her injuries were caused by JPM's abuse. Okay? Separation of church and state and ecclesiastical privilege. The First Amendment to the United States Constitution guarantees religious freedom and a separation of church and state. Religious organizations are granted independence from secular control or manipulation, ensuring they can determine matters of church government, faith, and doctrine without state interference. South Carolina courts recognize that civil courts may not engage in resolving disputes as to religious law, principle, doctrine, discipline, custom, or administration. However, South Carolina courts also recognize that civil courts may hear cases involving religious organizations if the dispute can be resolved using neutral principles of law. Under the neutral principles of law approach, courts may apply property, corporate, and other secular laws to church disputes. Courts retain jurisdiction over cases where religious doctrine is not an issue. Okay, blah, 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 blah. It's going to give us a bunch of case law. Let's go to 123. While allowing John Paul Miller to be a church leader may involve ecclesiastical considerations, the training, supervision, and monitoring of Miller to prevent the abuse of minors is a secular obligation governed by neutral principles of law, which defendants fail to uphold. The actions and behavior of a church entity and its agents must be analyzed to determine whether civil courts may intervene based on neutral principles of law. Okay. So they've addressed the statute of limitations issue. They've addressed the idea that ecclesiastical leaders are immune, separation of church and state. Let's see. Here's a background. The evolution of Daddy Miller, JP, and their various ministries. Daddy Miller's ministerial journey began in the early 1970s in Florence, South Carolina. In 1972, he founded the Florence Tabernacle Church, an independent congregation that quickly expanded its reach through various ministries. By the mid-1970s, Miller had established the Gloryland Bible College, later known as Cathedral Bible College, aiming to train individuals for Christian service. Miller's prominence grew with his regional television program, Good Morning Jesus, which aired across multiple states and into Canada. However, his career faced significant challenges in the late 1980s. On February 1989, WPDE TV 15, a local television station, aired a 5-part investigative report detailing allegations of misconduct involving Daddy Miller and students from his Bible college. In response to the mounting controversies and declining support in Florence, Miller relocated his ministry to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina in 1993. There he rebranded his organization as Cathedral Baptist Church and sought to establish a new campus. He acquired the former Myrtle Beach Air Force Base Chapel in 1995, intending to expand his church and college operations. This is an interesting history, man. Cathedral Baptist Church of the Grand Strand Cathedral was the primary religious organization established by Daddy Miller after relocating his ministry from Florence, South Carolina to Myrtle Beach in the early 1990s. Miller was forced to rebrand his ministry after the allegations and public scrutiny in Florence, but Miller maintained his same control over church operations, finances, and leadership. Cathedral served as the foundation for Miller's continued influence, providing him with direct access to congregants, financial resources, and leadership over affiliated religious institutions. Over time, in an effort to further distance himself from prior controversies and to maintain operational continuity under a new identity, Cathedral changed names and identities to All Nations Church, while remaining under the same centralized control of Miller and his inner circle. The structural change in name did not alter the reality that All Nations was a continuation of Cathedral, inheriting its assets, congregation, and leadership hierarchy. Holy crap, this kind of experience, like having gotten away with it 30 years ago, I bet JP Miller this whole time was like, Daddy did it, I can do it. I'll just rebrand. It'll be fine. Oh my goodness. Despite the formal changes in name and branding, All Nations remained functionally identical to Cathedral, operating under the same governance and with the same leadership. The church's physical assets, including the former Myrtle Beach Air Force Base Chapel, were controlled by the Miller family throughout these transitions. In 2013, the chapel was formally transferred from All Nations, formerly Cathedral, to Solid Rock Ministries, which had been formed by J.P. Miller, Daddy Miller's son, in 2006. Though the names have changed over the years, Cathedral Baptist Church, All Nations Church, Solid Rock Ministries are not separate and distinct entities, but rather a continuing joint enterprise under the exclusive control of Daddy Miller and J.P. Miller, evolving over time through strategic name changes and restructuring to maintain their influence, evade scrutiny, and shield assets from liability. You know, the way that they're describing it here, this is like a master's course in how to like defraud people and move on. I'm not accusing him of doing that, though I believe he did. I'm just saying, this is like these people are good at this. Okay. Despite changes in corporate identity, these churches have shared leadership, financial resources, governance structures, and a common purpose, making them functionally interchangeable and indistinguishable from one another. Each successive entity has absorbed the assets, congregation, and leadership of its predecessor, with Daddy Miller and JP maintaining absolute control over operations, finances, and policies. The rebranding from Cathedral Baptist Church to All Nations Church and the later transfer of key properties, including the chapel, to Solid Rock Ministries did not alter the underlying reality that these organizations function as one continuous enterprise under the Miller's authority. Rather than representing legitimate, independent religious organizations, they serve as alter egos of Daddy Miller and J.P. Miller, operating as a unified enterprise designed to preserve their power, protect them from liability, and continue their control over vulnerable members of their congregation. That strikes a chord because, look, in any product or service, in any business that is a product or service, which in the case of Solid Rock Ministries / All Nations / Cathedral, it was a money-making enterprise. That's what it was. It was an entertainment venue and enterprise. Well, when you're doing that, you have to identify who your target audience is. Likewise, as a predator who would prey upon children, you have to identify who the vulnerable people are. I guess I'm connecting the two, meaning that perhaps they were serving a vulnerable population and enticing them into the church for the purpose, maybe not the sole purpose, but for the purpose of being able to get away with their crimes. I mean, that's, if I were like an evil genius and I was Dr. Evil and I had my uniform and my lair and the whole shebang, I mean, that's what I would do. That's what any business does, good or evil, right? Okay. You know, this is a good time to just check in to see what you guys are saying over there. Let's see. Oh dear. Texas Surfer 65. Gavin, that's why the church had a school. Oh, that is diabolical, man. But you're probably right. Sounds very cultish. Let me just keep on going. Mary D agrees with me 100%. Jess says, Gavin, I enjoyed getting the docs early. It's like getting homework before the stream. Well, good. I'm glad. 2023 might be Micah. It's just that paragraph seems like it was out of place. So yeah, it probably is Micah. It seemed like she was abused a second time by JP Miller. She was alleging that, but I think you're right. It probably was like the whole Micah Miller thing was like, oh my goodness, I am a survivor of this guy. Right. Let's see if there are any other things there before we go on. Yeah. Becca says it's a power play. It's awful. Mooney, gifting memberships because you're awesome. You guys are awesome. Thank you, Mooney, for doing that. That's amazing. Okay, let's go back over here. you guys can see it now. I need to be able to see it. There we go. Okay. I've actually got new monitors, but so I'll have 3 monitors so that I can see what you guys are saying and I can see, all the other stuff, but I'm going to be changing up the office pretty soon, redecorating the whole thing. Okay. Duties of Cathedral Solid Rock, JP and Daddy Miller to plaintiff. Paragraph 147. Defendants, Cathedral Solid Rock, Daddy Miller, JP Miller owed duties to the plaintiffs. Again, that sounds like there are going to be more. Defendant Daddy Miller and JP Miller were employees and agents of Cathedral and Solid Rock during all times referenced in this complaint. In South Carolina, a duty of care may arise from various sources, including special relationships, common law recognized duty, voluntary undertaking, statutory obligations. So basically they're just making the argument, hey, they had a duty. Let's see. The duties arose from a special relationship between defendants and the minors in their care, as the church understood that children were allowed to be present at different places on the premises, including the sanctuary or youth programs, which were all under church leadership. This freedom to roam of children placed them under the direct supervision and authority of adult mentors and church leaders by assuming responsibility for minors in a structured setting. Okay, so they have a duty to protect them and safeguard them from harm. They affirmatively assured parents their children would be safe. So I'm just gonna kind of go through this because it's not saying specifically what it is that they did or didn't do. Okay, but yeah, they had to vet employees, the whole shebang. We get it, and I'm sorry that I'm yada-yadaing this a little bit, but you guys can go and read the whole thing if you want. Okay. Now I think we're getting into the nitty-gritty here, guys. Defendant's knowledge of prior misconduct and emotional abuse. Plaintiff is informed and believes, based on multiple sworn affidavits, that J.P. Miller and Daddy Miller had long-standing knowledge of misconduct, emotional and exploitation within their church community long before the incidents alleged in this complaint occurred in 1998 and 2023. Despite their awareness, they failed to take appropriate action, allowing the cycle to continue unchecked. Knowledge of J.P. Miller's misconduct with minors. Plaintiff is informed and believes that J.P. openly admitted to engaging in misconduct with minor female members of Solid Rock Ministries, an admission that was corroborated by multiple witnesses. In her sworn affidavit, Allison Williams, formerly Miller, testified that J.P. confessed to her that he had been, I'm just going to skip the word inappropriate, with several underage female members of their church. See Exhibit 1. Again, as a patron of mine, you can go check Exhibit 1. We're not going to go over that one in its entirety. 180. J.P. Miller attempted to justify his behavior by blaming his own history of childhood SA by his father, Daddy Miller. Williams' affidavit further states that when J.P.'s misconduct became known to the church leadership, he was ordered to enroll into an addiction rehabilitation program. And again, there's another affidavit that you can get on Patreon. Or you can just go to the court website and grab it, okay? Rather than ensuring the safety of minors within the congregation, JP and church leadership worked to suppress the allegations and silence victims, enabling his continued leadership within the church. And that blows my mind. Dude, okay, so say you're a member of a local church and you become aware that your pastor, say you're in leadership, right? There's like a board that has been elected And of course, the church is all under the control of one or two men, let's say, but you're on the board and you have some sort of responsibility to your church. And then you hear your pastor, the top dog at the church, admit to these kinds of, like, being guilty of these kinds of allegations. And you say, you need to go into an addiction program. Like, yes, you could say that, but that's at the very most step 2. Step 1 is you're out. Actually, step 2 is call the cops. No, I have to rethink that. Step 1, call the cops. Step 2, oust the pastor. Step 3, help him get the help that he needs. Step 4, never let him in a position like that ever again. For the sake of the children and for the sake of the organization that you love, you have to do that. Instead, they skipped right to step 4, which is just mind-boggling to me. Mind-boggling. I mean, that should be in the organization's bylaws. Okay, if anybody in our church does anything or admits to anything that is illegal, step 1, call the police. Step 2, we're all witnesses. That, that should be in the bylaws or what the governing document, whatever. Okay. So paragraph 183, rather than ensuring the safety of minors within the congregation, JP and church leadership worked to suppress the allegations and silence victims, enabling his continued leadership in the church. This is so reminding me. I mean, you brought it up before, but it's reminding me of Spotlight. I have watched that movie 10 times if I've seen it once. I love it so much. But that opening scene where the family with the abused boy is sitting in the police station while the father is getting protected and taken away. Right? That's what this reminds me of. Okay, paragraph 184. This failure to investigate and allowing JP to maintain access to young congregants allowed him to continue his predatory behavior. Okay, prior allegations of misconduct by Daddy Miller. Plaintiff is informed and believes that Daddy Miller's predatory behavior spans decades and that his son, JP, learned and adopted his father's practices. In her sworn affidavit, Susan Miller, this is Exhibit 2, okay? Daddy Miller's ex-wife detailed how Daddy Miller physically and emotionally abused his family and exercised absolute control over both his household and his church congregation. That makes me sick. Susan Miller attested that Miller's obsession with power and control extended beyond his immediate family and into the church, where he engaged in inappropriate relationships with young men and women, many of whom were vulnerable members of his congregation. I mean, you could argue that all of them were vulnerable members of the congregation if he has some sort of power over them, like one might in a church. Additionally, Miller was publicly accused of misconduct in a televised news investigation, which aired allegations that he preyed on young men from his congregation. This report forced Miller to relocate from Florence, South Carolina to Myrtle Beach in an effort to escape scrutiny and rebuild his religious enterprise under a new name, Cathedral Baptist Church of the Grand Strand, now known as All Nations Church. Despite the overwhelming evidence of prior misconduct, JP and Daddy Miller continued to operate their churches without meaningful oversight, failing to implement or enforce policies to protect minors from exploitation. So the deliberate suppression of allegations and institutional cover-up. Both JP and Miller strategically used their religious authority to suppress allegations and discourage victims from coming forward. As noted in the Allison Williams affidavit, JP's inappropriate behavior with minors. Of course, I'm skipping these words on purpose, guys, but you guys understand I'm not doing it to hide anything or change the meaning. I want you guys to read along while I'm going. Was widely known among church leaders, yet they took no effective action to prevent further abuse. Instead, JP manipulated or ignored church policies and leadership structures to shield themselves from accountability. See Williams' affidavit. The defendants and church leaders' failure to take corrective action regarding J.P. Miller's known predatory behavior, combined with their continued allowance of Daddy Miller to lead a church despite past allegations, fostered a culture of complicity. This inaction created an environment where this kind of misconduct was tolerated, enabling abuse to flourish within Cathedral and Solid Rock, contributing in part to the harm suffered by plaintiff Jane Doe 1. You know, my guess after reading this far, we're now 27 pages into this document, is that not only will there be more plaintiffs added, I bet there will be more defendants added. Okay. Factual allegations supporting the cause of action. We've been at it for almost exactly an hour now, and here we are. This is where the rubber meets the road. By 2003, JP had positioned himself as a high-ranking pastor of a large congregation, presenting himself as a spiritual leader while continuing to engage in predatory behavior. In 2023, plaintiff encountered J.P. Miller in person in Myrtle Beach while accompanied by a friend. So maybe it's not Micah Miller. Despite being in a public setting, J.P. leaned into Jane Doe number 1 as if to hug her and shoved his hand down her pants, touching, without consent. Plaintiff immediately recoiled and tried to brush it off and moved his hand because she didn't think her friend noticed and was scared. Can you imagine the avalanche of emotions that must have fallen on her in that moment and the freaking huevos on this guy, man? Oh my goodness. About 30 minutes later, Jane Doe 1 and JP had a heated argument about him using his title of pastor and use scripture to justify that misconduct. In response, JP cited scripture telling plaintiff, "No man is without sin and temptation. God understands that." Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I mean, these are the allegations that were made in the Micah's Law list, right? She was in the hospital. Micah Miller was in the hospital and alleges that J.P. Miller was asking her to do certain things and using scripture to make her comply with what his desires were. My goodness. Guys, listen. Okay? For those of you who are religious, I am also religious, right? You cannot justify the breaking of worldly, national, state laws by saying that, "Oh no, I've been forgiven. Jesus paid for all this." You can't do that. You may think that you have some sort of spiritual forgiveness, and maybe you do, but you still are subject to the laws of man. If this happens in your church, don't ever, there is a case right now in my neck of the woods. I've talked about it a little bit, where there are allegations that a female teacher had inappropriate relationships with some boys at the high school. Okay. It is alleged that she joined a church and that members of the church then said, "Oh, well, God has forgiven her. She's okay." To which I say, maybe God has forgiven her, but she still would be subject to the laws of man. You have to. You just have to. Don't ever be in a position where you are defending somebody who should be in jail just because you can say, well, Jesus forgave him. Don't do that. Don't do that. And like, report them to the authorities for not only the good of the victims and future victims, but for their good, the offender's good. Just, oh my goodness, this stuff kills me. No man is without sin and temptation. God understands that. Oh my goodness. I just want to wring his neck. Look at that. Just look at his face. I just want to wring his neck, and that's enough. I've looked at his face enough. Oh. Okay. Paragraph 202. Plaintiff was left reeling from the encounter and experiencing a long-delayed spiral of self-doubt and depression caused by this fresh assault on her by J.P. Miller. This essay by J.P. Miller triggered repressed memories of plaintiff of things which occurred at an earlier time. Oh my goodness. The avalanche of emotions she would have been feeling. I mean, the weight of the world would be on her. Oh my goodness. Upon later reflection and trying to remember previous events, the plaintiff, oh my goodness, the nerve. The nerve. Oh, well, I abused you when you were a child, so I have power over you, and I know I have power over you, so I'm going to do it again. Because remember, guys, most of the times this stuff isn't about sex. It's about power and control. The chutzpah, man. Okay. Upon later reflection and trying to remember previous events, the plaintiff realized that JP had assaulted her almost 20 years before. Jane Doe, number one, was SA'd at the age of 15 in 1998 by J.P. Miller. At the time, she did not fully comprehend the nature of what had happened to her or the extent of the harm it caused, because of course she didn't, because she was a child. She is not to understand those things at that age. She is to be protected and nurtured and reared and taught in a safe and loving environment. Oh my goodness. The trauma was deeply buried, because of course it was. And for decades, she had no conscious recollection of the assault. The plaintiff lost her memory before she turned 18, likely within a few months or a year of the occurrence of the 1998 assault. It was not until she experienced another SA in 2023 by J.P. Miller that the suppressed memories of the 1998 incident resurfaced. Micah Miller died April 27th, 2024. It just occurred. I'm pretty sure. I know they had been separated, but when was this in? Let's see. I know that I need to go back to paragraph 210. It just says in 2023. It doesn't say when in 2023. But I believe, obviously he was still married to Micah Miller. But I think they probably were still together in 2023. Oh my goodness. There are probably so many other victims, guys. There are probably so many other. If this is true, if there is one, then there's 100. I just, wow. Okay. Paragraph 210. Through therapy and reflection following the more recent assault, Jane Doe came to understand the profound impact of the earlier abuse, as well as its connection to the psychological and emotional struggles she had endured throughout her life for almost 20 years. After her memories were triggered by the second assault, the plaintiff remembered details of the 1998 SA. In June of 1998, plaintiff Jane Doe number 1, a 15-year-old minor, attended All Nations Church, formerly known as Cathedral Baptist Church of the Grand Strand, Inc. Plaintiff spent her summers in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, residing with her grandparents, who were members of the cathedral. Plaintiff's time in Myrtle Beach was supposed to be a period of safety, love, and warmth. Her grandparents were her support system, and the summer she spent with them were among the happiest times of her childhood. We've talked about this on the channel, right? I know that not everybody has. In fact, it might be most people don't have it, but the beautiful relationship of a grandchild to their grandparents who are loving and nurturing. So this should have been a period of safety, love, and warmth. J.P. Miller was a 19-year-old adult male employed at Cathedral as a youth leader and musician at Cathedral in 1998. At the time of the events in question, J.P. Miller was known to his father, head pastor, church leadership, and members as a troubled individual with a history of reckless behavior, including prior legal troubles, a child born out of wedlock, and a pattern of misconduct. Despite this knowledge, church leadership, including Daddy Miller, who is J.P. Miller's father and the head pastor of All Nations, failed to take reasonable steps to monitor J.P. Miller's behavior and continued to allow him unrestricted access to minor children at the church in the sanctuary, his father's office, or in the church's programs, including the youth program. Daddy Miller had personally engaged in this kind of misconduct before 1998. He knew his son was engaging in that kind of misconduct. This was the proverbial axe guarding the hen house. What did I say? Axe? Fox guarding the hen house. Daddy Miller did not institute any type of safeguard over the dangers posed by J.P. Miller or himself. Daddy Miller had complete control of the church by virtue of the bylaws, which left him in complete control of the church without any oversight by anyone else. Though he was in control, there were other leaders of the church who could have intervened to protect the minors. They did not. I'm telling you, there are going to be more defendants here once discovery gets going. I really hope this lawsuit goes the distance. I hope it gets into deep, deep discovery, man. And I wonder, but I think that there will be other plaintiffs that will come forward and go, you know what? Yeah. Okay, talking about the other leaders of the church. They ceded complete control to Daddy Miller, who allowed his son, JP, to have free reign over the church and the minors at the church. The church was JP's sexual playground. Leadership of the church, including Daddy Miller, should have undertaken something to protect the minors at the church from JP and any other predator, including Daddy Miller. They did not. On or about July 19th, 1998, a Sunday morning, plaintiff attended Cathedral, formerly All Nations Church, with her grandparents and her grandmother, who proceeded to her Sunday school class held in a separate classroom building, the Academy building, on church property. Plaintiff initially intended to attend Sunday school with her grandmother, but changed her mind and instead went to the church building where she intended on going to her grandfather's Sunday school class. Okay? The classes had begun and the doors were shut, and Jane Doe number 1 wasn't aware of which room he was in, so instead of interrupting classes, she entered the main church sanctuary. JP was playing the piano and another band member was strumming a guitar. Upon noticing plaintiff, JP engaged her in conversation. At some point, plaintiff stepped away from the sanctuary and walked down the hall to the restroom. When plaintiff exited the restroom, she encountered JP standing near his father's office door. JP called out plaintiff's name and initiated a seemingly innocent conversation inquiring about a mutual friend's recent absence from church. Without warning. Oh, okay. I need to take a break. Give me a second. I have to gear up for this, guys. I have not read this far into the document. This is going to be the rough part, I think. We're going to keep it as clean as we possibly can here, but we don't want to water down what the allegation is. So I just want to give you guys that heads up, okay? If you've been on the bubble during what we've been doing so far, probably a good idea to just maybe turn off this episode. Like, if you're on the bubble, okay? Take Aida's example. It was a good example. Okay. Paragraph 238. Without warning, JP forced plaintiff inside his father's office, shutting the door behind him. JP immediately became aggressive, physically overpowering plaintiff and forcing her against the wall. Despite plaintiff's struggles and verbal pleas for him to stop, JP ignored her and forcibly moved her out of the office, down the hallway, and to a door that led outside to a grassy side yard of the church where JP's truck was parked. JP then forced Jane Doe number 1 into his truck, and that is where he raped her. At the time of the assault, plaintiff was a virgin. Plaintiff was terrified. This is a 15-year-old child. Plaintiff was terrified, physically overpowered, and left defenseless against JP's assault. JP, an adult man in a position of authority within the church, took full advantage of plaintiff's youth, inexperience, and vulnerability to commit this heinous act. Following the SA, plaintiff remained silent about what had occurred with JP and was overcome by shock, shame, and fear. In the following months, plaintiff exhibited clear signs of trauma, including severe depression, social withdrawal from family and friends, declining academic performance, and emotional distress and self-doubt, because, of course, she did. Sorry to keep saying that, but of course. You know, I'm going to pause for a second, okay? I'm going to pause for a second. We're going to get to your comments here, and we're going to continue on. But it is my sincerely held belief that what J.P. Miller is alleged to have done to this young woman is so much worse than murder. And there are people that disagree with me, including people that I love. But it is my deeply held conviction that that is the truth. I think, I'm sorry, I've got to take this lozenge. It is the worst crime that one can do. I don't even know how people get over it. I really don't. Well, they don't. That's the thing. There's no way. Oh my goodness. I don't want to show. You know what? I am going to show him. Not because I want to look at him, but he's got to be. This is the kind of crime where you're like, no, I'm showing their face. For sure. I know that we don't want to look at him. but we're going to look at him. Oh, all right. Let's bring up your comments again. You know what? Mooney gifted those 5 memberships. That made me feel a little bit better because Mooney's rad. My audio is skipping. Hold on. I'll see if I can improve it. Sorry about that. I will try to fix it. Robin Bernardi says, Gavin, I'm going to need a session of therapeutic cussing after this live. Jess says, anyone else get Tony Alamo vibes from reading this? Moofies says, Gavin, thank you for not watering it down. Victims need to be heard and known. Yeah. This is so bad, says Patty. They knew that JP had a troubled past and they still didn't monitor him. Stephanie says, Gavin, thank you for reminding religious people not to be hypocrites. It happens way too often. It is one of the reasons I'm not religious as an adult. Hypocrisy is something that is really hard to take in others, but when we look at ourselves, we are all hypocrites in some fashion. But we do need to, as religious communities, we need to take laws serious. I've got a friend, and I'm only saying this aloud because he is saying aloud, he's making a documentary series, who was the victim of SA by a Boy Scout leader. And what he tells me is that when he reported it to his ecclesiastical leader, he got told the same thing, that that he's been forgiven and to just drop it. And that is just absolutely wrong. Absolutely 100% totally wrong. It's 1,000% wrong. And I think it certainly happens a lot in religious organizations, but any organization where your identity is tied to that organization, that gives you incentive to protect the organization. Good people and bad people. That is the effect of it. So we need to not be those people. We need to not be those people. Yeah. Michelle says this is the tip of a very large iceberg. Kim says, yeah, this is how Catholic priests have always been dealt with. Yeah. Hopefully that has changed. I don't have faith that it is perfectly changed, but hopefully it's changed. But I think in reality it's changing. April 27 was the death of Micah's day. It just didn't say when in 2023 the assault took place. So I don't know. Becca says, Gavin, is this a criminal case? No, this is a civil case. This is the picture I should bring up. This is his mugshot. Let's bring up that one. Seek justice. Sandra says, Gavin, I knew it was just a matter of time with this guy. Tori Walker says, preach it, Gavin, amen. Stuff really burns my cookies. Gavin, thanks for being passionate about how unjust this all is. I wish more men were good like you. There are so many good guys. There's so many good men, guys. The majority of men are good guys. Just like the majority of women are good women, good gals. People are good. We just need to be very careful about the incentives that we have in our lives. And I'm talking like each one of us individually. What incentives might inspire us or incentivize us to do certain actions? And we need to know, we need to be aware of the times when those actions are wrong. It's hard, but we really have to do that. Jess says, I'm right there with you, Gavin. Yeah, that. Yep. Oh, this is a great comment, Gavin. So many of his sermons were about sexual relations. Yeah, yeah, and he would preach from the proverbial pulpit. I know he didn't have one up there; he was on a stage, but like talking about how women should submit themselves to their husbands. You know, this whole Pauline idea, this first century Pauline idea that that you should just submit because he is the man. Yeah, stuff rubs me wrong. Yeah, great comments, guys. You guys are amazing. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead. We will. Oh yeah, I did read. It was. You're right. It said June 19th, 2023. So not quite a year before Micah was killed. God secretary, I've always said I'd rather go to church with the hypocrites than go to hell with them. Yeah, I mean we all are hypocrites, all of us. None of us is immune from that. But there are things that are just like it's just beyond the pale, man. It's just beyond the pale. Oh no, it was June of 98, not 2020. Yeah, okay. I guess it doesn't really matter. I was just trying to figure that out. All right, let's go back to this. I think we're on page 31. We're at the end of 31. Yeah, okay. Of course, she had trauma, severe depression, social withdrawal, academic performance decline, emotional distress, self-doubt. Paragraph 247. Despite prior concerns about JP's behavior, church leadership, including Daddy Miller, failed to take any action to investigate or prevent further abuse. Shortly after being assaulted by JP in 2023, plaintiff received a text message informing her that JP's wife had died. So it must have been late 2023. Anyway, the cause of death was reported as a gunshot wound to the head under suspicious circumstances. Yes, I'm going to bring up Micah here because she plays a role in this. Within hours of her death, JP delivered a sermon using manipulative rhetoric to maintain control over his congregation, despite the tragic and questionable circumstances surrounding his wife's passing. Indeed, I agree with that. This was yet another example of JP's conniving and manipulative behavior. Plaintiff suffered immense guilt after JP's wife's death, believing that had she spoken up sooner, she might have prevented further harm to others. Yeah, and here's the thing about that is that, one, you are not to blame as the victim. The predator is the person who is to blame, but I think it's perfectly natural to have those feelings of guilt. Had I just spoken up, there probably are other victims. It's all my fault, which it isn't. But I understand those feelings of guilt. This guilt and shame experienced by Jane Doe number 1 for not reporting the second assault at the time of occurrence or the first assault after her memories came flooding back was another insult to the plaintiff's emotional psyche. JP's, no, yeah. I mean, I get her line of thinking. Line of thinking being, had I reported him, he would be in jail. He would not have been able to manipulate his wife into taking her life. Again, it wouldn't be your fault. It's not your fault, man. But I understand how the plaintiff might connect those dots in their heart and head. Those dots don't connect, but I can see how they would be connected in the head and heart of an emotionally and psychologically damaged person brought on by the defendant, allegedly. Okay, JP's history of predatory behavior, his continued acts of harassment and assault, and defendant's failure to protect children and to prevent JP's unfettered access to minor children have caused plaintiff severe and lasting harm. Okay, so here are the causes of action. Plaintiff, realleges, blah, blah, blah. All defendants had multiple neutral principles of law duties to plaintiff Jane Doe number 1 to prevent her from suffering harm at Cathedral Church. Defendant J.P. Miller emotionally manipulated, emotionally abused, inappropriately touched, used harsh language, SA'd, and assaulted Jane Doe 1 and performed his duties as a church leader in a negligent, grossly negligent, and reckless manner. As alleged above, defendants Daddy Miller, J.P. Miller, Cathedral, and Solid Rock had a neutral principle of law duty to protect plaintiff Jane Doe 1 from foreseeable harm. As alleged above, defendants were aware of or should have been aware of J.P. Miller spending a lot of alone time with specific minors in the course and scope of his duties at the church. At all relevant times prior to JP's interaction with plaintiff Jane Doe 1, defendants knew of this kind of misconduct, incidents involving the church or one of its affiliated programs. These incidents put defendants Cathedral, Solid Rock, and Daddy Miller on notice that they had a duty to implement those things. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and skip it down. They breached their duties, the whole thing. Failure to protect, failure to implement a system of protection, negligent misrepresentation of safety, failure to warn of known dangers, failure to train program managers, failure to supervise JP Miller, failure to monitor JP Miller, failure to protect plaintiff from SA, failure to ensure plaintiff safety at Cathedral, failure to create, implement, or communicate protective policies, failure to investigate prior incidents, failure to train church leaders. It just goes on and on and on. Okay? Second cause of action is that there's a civil conspiracy. Defendants, Cathedral Baptist Church, All Nations Church, Solid Rock Ministries, Daddy Miller, J.P. Miller, knowingly engaged in a concerted effort to conceal, suppress, and enable the continued misconduct of defendant John Paul Miller, thereby conspiring to protect him from accountability while placing minors, including plaintiff Jane Doe number 1, in foreseeable danger. This conspiracy was motivated, we've been talking about incentives, by the defendant's financial interests, institutional reputation, and personal loyalty to J.P. Miller rather than any legitimate religious or organizational purpose. Defendants knew or should have known that J.P. was a danger to minors as early as 1997 based on prior incidents of inappropriate behavior and misconduct involving young congregants. They were aware of specific allegations, inappropriate contact with minor females, and past warnings regarding JP's conduct, yet they deliberately chose to protect him rather than remove him from a position of power or authority within the church. Despite their knowledge of his predatory behavior, defendants took affirmative steps to hide, suppress, and prevent the reporting of JP's actions, including knowingly allowing JP to remain in leadership, refusing to report his conduct to law enforcement, suppressing or destroying evidence, discouraging or intimidating victims. I'm yada-yadaing this a little bit. Transferring or repositioning JP within the church. Yeah, that is the Catholic Church's modus operandi. Providing JP continued access to minors, misrepresenting the safety of the cathedral, and so on and so forth. Okay? Goodness sake. Okay, for a third cause of action, as to the defendant John Paul Miller, assault and battery. J.P. Miller threatened and intended to harm plaintiff Jane Doe 1 on multiple occasions in different decades. J.P. Miller inappropriately touched or violated plaintiff Jane Doe number 1, battery. As a direct and proximate result of defendant J.P. Miller's actions delineated above, Jane Doe suffered damages. Jane Doe has to undergo counseling and treatment as a result of J.P. Miller's battery and assault of her, and this will likely continue for the rest of her life. Goodness. Okay, fourth cause of action. Outrage, intentional or reckless infliction of emotional distress. Defendants recklessly or intentionally inflicted severe emotional distress on Jane Doe 1 by virtue of their actions, and it was certain or substantially certain that such distress could result from defendant's conduct. Okay. So they were reckless about it. Oh my goodness. And I'm sorry to yada yada this, but I think we understand the cause of action. The fifth cause of action is a violation of South Carolina unfair trade practices. Oh my goodness. Okay. Defendants Cathedral and Solid Rock held themselves out and still do as organizations that provide a safe, structured, and nurturing environment for children under the age of 16. They're aware of ongoing and historical failures to protect minors from exploitation within their facilities. Plaintiff, relying on defendants' representations regarding the safety and supervision of children at the church, attended church at Cathedral and Solid Rock, placing their minor granddaughter, Jane Doe 1, at risk of unknown danger. Okay, yeah, I get that cause of action, and then there is the signature page. That is it. I'm sorry, I'm bringing him up again. Bringing up his mugshot. We're going to take a look at his mugshot. And we're going to head on over to your comments one more time here before we call it a night. No, I know this has been a long one, guys. This is just this whole case just I just hate it so much. Everything. And he continues to, well, hopefully, I mean, he continues to walk around a free dude, right? I know he's been arrested here and there, but wow. Mehdi says, Gavin, I haven't followed this case since last year. Are they going to charge him for anything related to Micah's death? No, I don't think so. I don't think that'll happen. Friendly nag that Sparky Napalm, aka Brian, could be a guest again and talk about these kinds of crimes. Yeah, I could reach out to Brian. 100%. Yeah, Brian would be good to talk about on this one. J.P. Miller sold the property on Valentine's Day. I saw that. I did see that. He might be needing money at this point. Todd, who's Demon Hugger's friend, so disturbing to use a religious blanket to try justifying illegal actions. Yeah, Stephanie says, you're right, we don't get over it. Yeah, nobody ever does, Stephanie. But I hope that you're well. James, glad that you cut the tail end. And Buzzcat, it's often men in some kind of power. Yeah, it usually is. Not always, but usually. Autumn, thank you very much for gifting those memberships. You are awesome. Gavin, you realize that says Jane Doe 1. That means there will be more. Yeah, I am suspicious that there will be more. It doesn't mean necessarily that there have to be, but knowing this guy's MO, God Secretary, I'm with you. There will probably be more. Okay. Gavin, are we going to get a JP imitation from you? Great stress reliever. Do I do a JP impersonation? I don't remember that at all. I don't remember it at all. But if you do, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear your impersonation. Guys, that brings us to the oops, wrong button. That brings us to the end of tonight's stream. I am so glad that you are here with me and that you went through this whole thing. So important to give victims like this a voice. Remember, of course, that these are only allegations. They've not been proven. Many of us want to and do believe them, myself included. But let's just keep an eye on it. Let's not engage in any kind of I don't know, untoward behavior toward him. Let's just let it play out in court. We'll watch it very carefully. We'll talk about it with ourselves. But please, nobody go out and try to make him do something or confront him or anything like that. Don't do that. Let's just be the gallery on this one, shall we? Hey, remember you can go to my website, gavinfish.com, to see everything in the Micah Miller case that I have. If you're on Patreon, you have full and unfettered access to all of these files, and plus the files that I upload directly to Patreon. CrimeCod is my website, my true crime website that I encourage you to go and check out from time to time. It also posts on social media. You can follow it on Facebook. You can follow it on X. Sign up for its newsletter would be a great idea. You can do that right here. You can even do it on my website. You can scroll down to the bottom of my website and you can sign up for the CrimeCod newsletter there. Clicking on this little fishy will take you over to the fish tank on Facebook. If you're on Facebook and you like to talk about true crime, that's a good place to do it. And then, last thing I want to do is show you this support me page. For those of you who haven't seen it, these are all the different ways that you can support me. But the most important one, scroll on down there and support my moderators. Buy Autumn a coffee, will you? She takes care of us. She and all the moderators do this as a service. They volunteer for it. They don't get paid for it. So if you feel like if you feel like Autumn specifically deserves some support, you can give it to her there. Okay? I don't think last thing I will tell you is that tomorrow we are going, I know that things keep coming up. We are going to be talking about the Gabby Petito case. This is very important. We're going to be talking about the new details that came out in the documentary series. We're going to be talking a little bit about the interviews that her parents have done since the documentary series. It's going to be a good live stream. And then, hopefully, we'll be able to get back to the Judge Kevin Mullins case and continue to go through the transcript of Ben Fields. And then eventually we are going to get to the transcript of Sabrina Adkins. So a lot going on in that case. There's a lot going on for the rest of the week and even into next week. So yeah, I hope you come back. Thanks so much for being here today. I bid you adieu, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.